Hello, hello. Welcome once again to another edition of Quoth Raven, Lewis Bright Raven. I'm your host, Lewis Bright Raven. It's Friday, August 8th, a little bit after 8 o'clock. We usually do it at 8. We ran a little bit late because I had some last-minute issues. Got them corrected. We're ready to go. Joining with me is like regular co-host, the colorful great pumpkin himself, Chris Hall.
Hello, everybody. How y'all doing? Come on in, take a seat, grab something cold to drink.
Yes. This was an interesting week, wasn't it?
It was, absolutely.
We picked the film that was a documentary in 2007 or 2010, depending on what sources you check, but I think it's 2007, called Comic Book Independence, the creative power of graphic novels. And it's a very interesting film.
It is. Yeah, it is. It's a good little documentary. It really is.
Yeah, but there are some major flaws with it, I think. So let's talk about it.
All right.
And it's not going to share the screen, of course. Why would we do that, right? There we go.
Just a little slow in the uptake. You want me to read it?
Yeah, you go ahead and do that.
Okay, all right. Comic Book Independence, The Creative Power of Graphic Novels, 2007. This is directed by Chris Brandt. Producers were Jennifer Albrecht and Chris Brandt. Editor was Chris Brandt. Starring Jessica Abel, Trevor Alexopoulos. There you go. Scott. Yeah. Scott Alley, Michael Dooley, Kevin Eastman, Gary Groth, Eric Jones, James Corey Kaufman, Keith Knight, Eric Larson, Batten Lash, Matt Madden, Scott McLeod, Carla Speed McNeil, Linda Medley, Tony Millionaire, Scott Mills, Terry Moore, Wendy Peeney, Eric Powell, Johnny Ryan, James Simon, Craig Thompson, Dan Vado, Landry Walker, Brett Warnock, Mike Wellman, Shannon Wheeler, Robert Williams.
And last but not least,
and Jim Woodring. With a runtime of about 1 hour and 17 minutes. This is a documentary featuring interspersed commentaries from about a dozen creators, editors, publishers, and retailers.
Dozens. Over 20.
Dozens of creators, editors, publishers, and retailers about what being an independent comics person means to them and how it has shaped their ideologies and business practices over the decades.
Okay, there's really not a whole lot to say about this film. It is what it is. A bunch of commentaries from many luminary parties within the comics industry, especially in the time period in which this film was made. That having been said, the director and editor does seem to be all over the place, and I think he lost the narrative. Do you agree with me?
I think so, yes.
Okay. While there are many excellent commentaries and truths spoken by the parties being interviewed, and we'll get into that in a moment, it doesn't feel like it has any sense of theme, historical timeline, or perspective, and many of the creators are getting one-liners in at a time, interspersed between each other randomly, and it doesn't necessarily... They're not in conjunction with the context of what each other are talking about.
Right.
So I think that was a problem for the film. A more proper approach, in my opinion, or our opinion, would have been to just have given each person 3 to 5 minute segment to themselves, and then, maybe edited it so that the ones that were saying the same things were all in conjunction with each other.
Right.
And then the ones who had differing opinions might have in a different segment or something like that. I think that would have been a more effective process of editing and presentation. But the result of the method that the director used was that the film, for me, became very droll and boring to follow, just because there wasn't a cohesive narrative to it. Am I mistaken in that opinion?
Not at all. Nope. My two biggest problems with this documentary was, one, I don't feel as though it added anything historically to the knowledge of independent comics.
Go ahead.
No, I just feel like it was just kind of rehashing stuff that most people know, and like your feelings, and what makes a good story. What do you think? Where does a good story come from? And just it didn't add anything. And two, the views are a bit dated because nowadays, reading comics are not like taboo. They're not looked down upon. Comics are comics and comic movies are hotter than they've ever been. So
right. Well, keep in mind that is an almost 20-year-old film.
Right. That's why I said the views are a bit dated. So
there is some historical perspective that was sort of a little bit addressed with Robert Williams and a few of the other guys that were classical from the 60s, early 70s independent scene, but they were not given a whole context to show the shift of what happened in each decade. And there were people in this collection of people, creators, that the director could have very easily have shown the evolution historically of how independents have shaped our market, have shaped our views of what comics are. And
Right.
that's where I think the film failed. That being said, I think there are many comments and things that are made that are very important to remember about what makes people successful, not just in comics, but in comics retailing, in comics distribution, because there are distributors in there as well. There was a common thread being heard. Don't listen to what everybody else thinks. Don't listen to what everybody else says. If you believe in what you're doing, fuck everyone else, go do it. You heard that time and time again in this industry. And I can speak from personal experience. When I had that attitude, I was a hell of a lot more successful in life than when I was worrying about what other people thought, or worrying about what the publisher wanted when I was freelancing for Marvel or DC or whatever, or worrying about what fans think or whatever. That stymies you creatively. It stymies you as a forward thinker in business and in life. Now, that doesn't mean that you should never pay attention to anybody else's opinions. There's always things to learn from each other.
Right.
But what we're saying is there's a lot of naysayers, there's a lot of negativity that if you get caught up in that, it will destroy you. Mm-hmm. And that is something that was mentioned by at least 8 different creators in this film. And so I think hearing that kind of like, as I was watching the film, I was like, yeah. I was like, yeah, okay, I get it. And I think for me, because I have been distracted by so many outside things in more recent years, and you guys know I haven't produced the kind of level of work creatively that I used to do in the 90s. I haven't done the things. This is exactly why. Because I'm thinking to myself, what's the point? I'm just going to, it's just going to either be ignored or it's going to be bitched about.
Mm-hmm.
And you really can't think about that. You have to tell your story, and the audience will find it. If, whatever size, it will be found.
Right.
And as you can see, one has found me. Yes, hello, baby boy.
Yes, tell your story and the audience will find you, or have a cat and the cat will find you.
Mm-hmm. I also liked the commentary about how solitary this business is.
That's true.
A lot of people were talking about not so much the loneliness of it, but how you are constantly on your own. You have to be a self-motivator because it's very rare to find your tribe, shall we say.
Right.
and have them there. That has changed a lot since when this film was made, because now we have the internet. We are more interactive with each other on social media than we've ever been before. But at the time that this film was made, that was a very truthful statement. Nowadays, it's still true. I mean, you do your coloring work pretty much on your own.
Right.
I'm writing and drawing pretty much on my own these days. Now, back in the 90s, yes, I had a studio. I had people giving me feedback. I was giving them feedback. And that energy that you get from one another helps motivate you. It helps bring the best out of you, because you're always, I don't want to say competing with each other per se, but it's like, that's cool. I got to one up him.
Right.
Or that's cool. How do I show me how you did that so I can figure out how to incorporate that into what I do?
Right.
And there was a more camaraderie, I guess you could say, in that sense. Whereas I don't see that as much in today. I see more competitiveness, more vitriol. And again, I think that pertains to the negativity of society and social media more so.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're more connected than ever with social media, but at the same time, people are more isolated than ever because they don't physically go anywhere. They don't have that, eye to eye, face to face, like you said, camaraderie and interaction that we used to have.
Yeah. And I think that has adversely affected our industry in the last, I don't know, what do I say, 10, 15 years?
Yeah, yeah. And, I'm part of a studio too, and we're working on stuff, and we talk all the time like we should do like a virtual studio.
Mm-hmm.
FaceTime each other and just put at least 6 hours a day into, looking at each other, talking with each other, and working and throwing ideas around. And hey, I'm working on this, and so we've been talking about that a lot, actually. So
yeah, it's beneficial because it's better than having it's one thing because that works, but only works to a certain level of extent.
Right.
If I see something on your artwork on a screen, I can't necessarily like show you what I would do physically. I'm not there to physically change the art or physically give an example. We have to go around a rigmarole way to try and show it,
Right.
And that can be done, but it's also time consuming. Whereas the thing is going to be a lot more easier. But
right.
That's one of the things. We're more spread out than we ever been before. We're more, I don't want to say, isolated is as good a word as any, I suppose. But there's also a difference because social media gives, unfortunately, kind of an opportunity to be, what's the right word for this? Two-faced, I guess. You have people will say different things to your face, and then they say different things behind your back, so to speak. That's more on social media than it is in person.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And
also, people put forward a facade on social media. Like, oh, everything's great, everything's da da da, happy joy, and then behind the camera they're like,
yeah. But but anyway, I think that's kind of the gist with that. And I liked a lot of what I saw in this film. I liked who they brought in. I wish there had been more for several of the people. I think Batten didn't get hardly any time on this film, and we miss him, and he had a lot that he could have, a lot more than he could have contributed to that film. I would have liked to have had more of Brett Warnock, a few other people in there that were creators who became publishers, explaining why they did that, what the process was like for them.
Right.
Those sort of things should have been more of what was talked about rather than these one-liner anecdotes and then skip to the next person and the next person. Then we'll come back to you and do another one-liner.
Yeah.
That was the big flaw of this film. And
do you feel like they gave more time to the more successful independent creators than the other ones?
That's debatable. Because there's different types of success. And
well, I should say popular then.
Well, no, even in popularity. I mean, because they gave Scott McCloud quite a bit of stuff, and Scott, while he's more of a historical significance, he's got some popularity because of Zot and understanding comics and making comics. At the same time, a majority of the fan community, even back then, and Scott was a very prevalent person, and even in that era, a lot of people wouldn't be able to pick him off the street. Fans, they wouldn't know who he was to look at him. Whereas, yes, Wendy Pini. But the reason Wendy Pini is not just because of ElfQuest, it's because she was a hot Red Sonja one time.
Right.
And people remember that,
And of course, everybody knows Eric Larson.
Well, yeah, but Eric wasn't really an independent per se. They knew him from his Marvel work initially and DC work. That's how they got to know him. They didn't,
but he was doing Savage Dragon on his own before Marvel, though, I believe. That
was his kid comic that he was doing back in the day before he ever went professional. True. And he did do, I think he did 1 or 2 issues of Savage Dragon appearing in Megaton, if I remember correctly.
Right, yes.
But as far as people knowing him, who he was, it was really once he got into DC and Marvel. Go on now. There you go. But yeah, and there were people that were missing from this that could have been in this discussion as well. There needed to be more discussion from the publishers like Dan Votto. I am not sure. I mean, I understand why they brought James Simon, Mike Wellman, and other people in that were more so towards the retail side than the creative necessarily, although those guys do have creative input as well. I think, though, having those people represent, you have to kind of explain that they're outliers. This is not how the majority of retail looks at the independent comic book scene.
Right.
And that needed to be more expressed in the film, more so. I would love to see a remake of this done, I don't want to say properly, but just with a little more focus. And maybe a little bit more. I don't know if you're not going to be able to get the same people because a lot of them are no longer with us, unfortunately. But find the people that are still around from the old school and interview them. Yeah. And I mean, really interview them. And I would do like 2 or 3 volumes of this as a series. Give a more historical perspective as to how the 60s evolved into the 70s direct market, early 80s direct market, into the black and white market explosion and implosion of the late 80s, into the image evolution or revolution, whatever you want to call it, into the second implosion that happened when the diamond monopoly happened, and then how it's evolved more recently into the crowdfunding and print on demand and DTC type levels, because there's so much independent comics now that we size the mainstream 9-1.
Right.
And I think and that's what needs to be more presented today. And I would have liked to have seen, and I'd like to go with how graphic novels have evolved from when Eisner was doing them and coined the term graphic novel to the late 60s, early 70s stuff that was done by Byron Preiss, the stuff that was done by Gil Kane with Black Mark, stuff like that, into the Marvel graphic novels of the 80s, the Jim Shooter, the mini graphic novels, the thin ones that started that whole brand, into Starblaze Graphics, into what went back to Wendy and Richard Pini, all of those things, giving a more historical perspective. So, this was a good foundational effort, but there's so much more to what this could have been and should be. And I would love to see Brandt or some other people approach this again with a more focused group of process. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. And like I was going to say, I was expecting more of a historical documentary, going through the history of independent comics and, the start up till the current and blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't there.
Yeah.
So that's why I gave this a 3.5.
Yeah. We both gave it 3.5 because, it was a good, interview type, thing. It wasn't the best edited. Like I said, I think if we'd given each one a full range and not interspersed in between each other, I think this would have been a 4. But it was lacking that cohesiveness.
Wow. If only we knew someone, if only we knew a couple people, one of them that was really, really smart and knew a shit ton of stuff about the industry and could go interview people. And then, like, maybe the other one would be like a video editor and know how to put together a really snazzy video. Like, if only we knew people like that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, we're just clueless, aren't we?
A couple people like that could probably put together a pretty good documentary.
Possibly, yeah. Truth is, I'd rather let Kevin do it. I mean, I would be happy to interview people, but as far as a director and film productions and stuff, I'd need Kevin Van Hook or somebody who's really more knowledgeable in that frame to do things. I think because even documentaries, there's a way to do filmmaking. There's a way to do proper shots and angles and how to affect certain emotional evocation that you want for emphasis to what people are trying to get across.
Right, and that's added a lot in post.
Right, and this film, well, no, it's not just that. You need to have a writer who understands that cohesive context. And this did not have a writer to it. This film had no credited writer, and that's because it didn't have a cohesive narrative. So you have to have a director and a writer who are on that same page to do that in that context. And so I would want, since I'm not a filmmaker, I would want someone who was more knowledgeable on that scope and then adjust what I would do to fit what's needed. But there's a lot of people out there that were not covered, and there's all kinds of other people from different generations. Like I said, you could do a TV series of this easily. But yeah, but doing this, I mean, okay, then we got to get into the business sense of it too. So, we'll see. Right?
I know some people.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So that's our conversation on that. Whoops. I knew it did something wrong there. Again, we give it a 3.5 out of 5. And next week, we're going to do another one. We're going to do Tribute War, from U.S. Soldier to Comic Artist.
that should be fascinating. I've never seen this one, so
yeah, I figure, hopefully this is a good film. I haven't seen it either. So hopefully people will get some more historical perspective on Jack. I like the idea of going from U.S. soldier to comic artist because he started before the war as a cartoonist and was put into the war. So I don't know how much before his wartime effort is going to be discussed and how he evolved as a person after being a soldier. We'll have to wait and see, but should be quite interesting because a lot of what he does as a writer of superhero comics, some of the bombastic attitudes, the not just the patriotism of Captain America, but the way he writes characters who stand up to oppression has to do with his experiences, both as an immigrant, as a Jewish person in New York, but also how he saw people rise above that in wartime.
Right. And I love that line of his. It's all over Facebook. It goes something like, all I knew about a guy was if he was a Nazi, I'd knock his ass out.
Right. Yeah.
It was something like that. But yeah, I love that line. So
yeah, that's about it. But so that's next week's show for film. And there is no Monday manga next week. It'll be the next week after for continuation of Dinosaur Sanctuary. And so that leaves us with tomorrow. What do you got tomorrow for us at Glass House Throwing Stones?
Yes, on YouTube, Glass House Throwing Stones. That's a podcast with David Campetti and I. And we have the fabulous Christopher Sotomayor, a colorist extraordinaire, and teacher as well. So he runs how to color classes, and just like the man has so much knowledge, it's insane. So I'm really looking forward to talking to him.
I don't think he teaches just coloring. I think he talks about art theory as well in conjunction with color, because coloring and color theory applies to one level of comics, but you have to understand art theory in conjunction with coloring as well, and why line art is done a certain way and how you access those things. So I think, when we say he teaches coloring, we're kind of not undervaluing, but not giving a full representation of what he's teaching.
Yeah, it's the whole spectrum. He goes into classical art and shows comparisons between what people are doing now and what people maybe should be doing now, as opposed to what the masters of old have did, and just all kinds of So the man has so much knowledge.
And Chris is probably going to go into that tomorrow to a small degree, maybe not excessively, but
right.
Talkative he is. But that's live at 1 p.m.
Yeah, Eastern Standard Time.
And that's at Glass House Graphics on YouTube, Glass House Throwing Stones.
Yep, absolutely.
So that's what's going on this weekend, and we appreciate you for watching, and we'll see you on Tuesday for crowdfunding and independent talk. And I don't know if we're going to have guests or not. I'm waiting to hear back, but I'll let you guys know early next week. Okay. In the meantime, if you want to contact us on Facebook, you can reach me at lewis.brightraven, on the Muskrat X channel at lewisbrightraven2. You can see more of my artwork at deviantart.com/brightraven. You can see more of Chris Hall's work at deviantart.com/fatboy73. You've been watching Quoth the Raven, Lewis Bright Raven, exclusively on YouTube. If you have questions, comments, movies, or comics you'd like us to review, perhaps, Quoth the Raven LBR72@gmail.com is the place to reach out to us at. And if I don't get back to you, try lewisbrightraven@yahoo.com. And if you want to talk to Chris, GHthrowingstones@gmail.com is the best place to reach him.
Yes, sir.
So thank you for watching. We'll see you guys next time. Have a great night and a great weekend. Quoth the Raven, nevermore.
Nevermore.